How's it going, guys? Jacob Palacio here. It's currently 3:46 a.m. and I'm here recording a review for Skinamarink, which is a film that came out earlier this year. Well, technically, the film premiered at Fantasia Fest back in July of 2022, but was not released, at least here in the United States, until January 2023. So I technically count it as a 2023 film, although it premiered at film festivals last year. Anywho, the film has been released publicly for quite a while now. In fact, before it was even released publicly, the movie got leaked online and people were sharing it across like Twitter and Reddit and stuff. So yeah, a good amount of people have seen this movie, and TikTok. Can't forget about TikTok. That was a huge factor in this film's popularity. But thank God this movie got as popular as it did, because holy shit, this movie is unlike anything I've ever seen. Skinamarink is an experimental analog horror film, in a sense. And if you don't know what analog horror is, it's basically this subgenre of horror that is essentially made to look like it was made, back in the early 2000s. It's like the type of horror that you would only find specifically on the internet, because of its low quality, and because of just the fact that it's pretty out there and it's pretty niche for the wider audience. Analog horror often has like low fidelity graphics, and it's a very distinct style that's made to look like it's from like the late 1900s, like television shows and analog recordings. So it's intentionally supposed to look very old and very dated, and that's kind of where the horror comes from as well. It's because we're not used to seeing something that's so behind our time, and people online would often take advantage of the fact that the graphics are very, very low fidelity, and they would make it spooky. This film definitely falls under that category, and it's incredibly experimental. This movie polarized people. There's people out there that hate it, there's people out there that love it, there's people out there that just completely get and understand what it's doing, and there's people there who literally just think that this movie's completely meaningless, with shots that are just like staring at a ceiling for 5 minutes straight. Skinamarink was made on a budget of only $15,000. It was very cheap and was essentially made by this one guy and a very, very small crew in his childhood home. This man is named Kyle Edward Bell. This is his first full-length feature with a runtime of 100 minutes. He made a film during the pandemic era in 2020 called Heck, and Heck is just like this 30-minute little short film that kind of just exists as like a proof of concept for Skinamarink. Heck was very successful as a analog horror, little YouTube short. So Kyle Edward Bell got to make Skinamarink, which is basically the same thing, just full length. There is a story to this movie, but it's a very unconventional story, and the storytelling is mostly through the filmmaking techniques. The film follows a little boy and a little girl who are brother and sister. Obviously, they live at home with mom and dad. They both wake up in the middle of the night, only to find out that the father is missing and that the mother is acting a little crazy, and also the windows and doors in the house are slowly starting to disappear. So basically, this brother and sister are stuck in purgatory in this house in the middle of the night, and that's essentially the movie. We're just slowly watching these children just like descend into madness, and we're as lost as they are in this situation because we don't know what the fuck is going on. And that's one of the biggest strengths of this movie, is that it does an incredibly good job at putting you in the mindset of a child. It puts you in this vulnerable state because you're in a very familiar yet unfamiliar environment. As a child, everything that everything around you is your home, because that's where you are most of the time, and that's the place where you're most comfortable and you're most familiar with. But once that environment is altered, that's when you start to freak out, because you can't find comfort in that place anymore. And Skinamarink does a really good job at giving you those feelings. A lot of the shots in this film are incredibly unconventional and will often just really focus on inanimate objects throughout the house. We rarely even see the little boy and little girls, but rather just mere shadows here and there, or maybe the back of their head every once in a while. But most of the time the camera is fixated on like a ceiling fan, or the floor or a television or an inanimate object or, a Lego set or VHS tapes or just something random. Just little fragments of memories that we would often have as a child, at this age. This film is obviously very personal to Kyle Edward Bell, who is a man who I would imagine is in, his late 20s, early 30s. So a lot of the stuff in this film, is probably stuff that he was familiar with as a kid, such as Lego sets and VHS tapes. This film essentially, it seems like it takes place in the late 80s, early 90s, because that's probably around the time this director was a child. And how the film got the name Skinamarink it's from a 1958 film called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and that was a film that I guess Kyle Edward Bell watched a lot as a kid, and it reminds him of that time. He decided to name it after that, and it just adds so many layers, and it's almost as if we're just literally walking right through his childhood. Essentially he's trying his absolute best to replicate on screen his adolescence and the things that remind him of being a kid and being in that vulnerable state, so to speak. And there's something just really creepy and eerie and familiar about Skinamarink, and a lot of the shots in here are just they're very vague and they're very foggy, and it's a lot to process for sure. There's even a shot in here where the camera is, I believe, panning across the room, and we're seeing a bunch of Lego sets and toys and dolls and stuff, and then all of a sudden you see this blanket, and that blanket is the same exact blanket that I had as a child. And not only that, but I have not seen that blanket since I was about 10, 11 years old. It's pretty scary that it's in there, and that I haven't thought about that blanket since I was about 10 years old until this movie. And that also, I think, really helped me put myself into the correct state of mind to really even process or enjoy something like this. People probably don't understand why the camera is fixated on the ceiling when it should be fixated on a person talking or something, but really there isn't any of that at all. This movie also has some incredible sound design. There's not a whole lot of dialogue in the film, but when there is, it's very whispery. He also includes subtitles throughout the film, which I think is really, really cool, and helps a lot with not only us understanding more of what's going on in the story, but also, again, going back to the analog horror, really gives it that feel as well, since analog horror would often include cryptic messages throughout, and it would have subtitles here and there, so it definitely gives it that vibe. The film has a surprising amount of jump scares for a movie like this, but I will say, and I'm not a big jump scare guy, I'm really typically not a fan of jump scares in horror movies, but the jump scares in this film are probably some of the most effective ones I've seen in a recent horror movie. They're so good, in fact, that they're already being talked about among the horror community and the film community, just because of how spooky they are, such as a telephone scene, which is a very infamous scene, and just a lot of really creepy shit in this movie. I'm gonna try to refrain from giving too much spoilers, since I think it's best to go into this film as blind as possible, but the information that I'm giving you, obviously, I think is good going into it, especially if you're not too sure if you want to see a movie like this, since you probably don't know what you're getting into, but it's pretty fucking out there, but very good nonetheless, at least in my opinion. And most people seem to agree as well, and that's pretty cool. And I'm glad the movie, again, got as popular as it did. In fact, it was very successful and it made back $2 million, which is pretty unheard of, especially for an incredibly low-budget movie made by some guy in his childhood home with a budget of $15,000. And it's kind of incredible, honestly, the fact that a guy out there was just made this really personal thing, something that is just completely not for the general audience, that is so out there and experimental, but he managed to do it. It worked, and it's popular, and because of this movie there's now a surge of analog horror films coming out. This is a new thing that is happening in the horror genre. We're getting the Backrooms film, which is being distributed by A24, and it's just becoming a very popular genre, and that's super fucking cool to see that horror is just expanding, and we're getting to see more of a side of horror that we haven't seen yet, and I'm so excited to explore that. The film was also released on Shudder and was distributed by Shudder, as well as IFC Midnight. But you can watch the film on Shudder now, and I highly recommend it. If you're a horror fan and you haven't seen this movie yet, and you're really into analog horror, psychological horror, I will even throw found footage horror in there, since it has a little bit of those elements as well. Even though it's not necessarily found footage film, it definitely gives off those same vibes. It being a movie that's made to look like it was way back in the day. But yeah, this movie rocked my socks off. I was in a trance the entire time I was watching it. It was definitely an experience for me. I have not felt, the amount of tension and dread and fear that this movie gave me in a very, very long time. And that's the biggest compliment I can give a horror film nowadays, especially seeing that there's a lot of, horror films that are coming out that are very tired, that are a lot of, just the same stuff that we've seen over and over again. It's just super nice to see something new and refreshing and creative and innovative and unique, and, it's becoming popular, and people, it's polarizing people, but it's getting people talking, and I think that's, the best thing, for it. Whether you love it or hate it, it's gonna go down, in the history books as being a pretty revolutionary movie, in my opinion, as far as, contemporary horror goes. I mean, I think this thing is pretty phenomenal. I really don't have much complaints with it. Yes, it is a little long. It's very unconventional. It's very slow, one could argue, although I was never bored throughout this movie by any means. I was on my fucking toes the whole time. But yeah, I enjoyed this movie so much. I enjoyed the experience. I love everything that this movie is going for, and I think it's honestly kind of perfect. And I love what it does, and I love how, it makes you feel nostalgic. I'm sure we all remember being kids and, being scared of things that we didn't understand, that, us as adults understand now. Being scared of the dark, or being scared by loud noises. That feeling as a child where all of a sudden, the environment that you're so familiar with, that you're so comfortable in, has completely changed and is completely different in what you're used to. Us as human beings, we're scared of all types of different things. Some people are scared of snakes, some people aren't. Some people are scared of clowns, some people are scared of the dark, some people are scared of heights, some people aren't scared of any of those things. But one thing that we for sure all have in common, as a rational fear, the biggest thing that scares us most is, unfamiliarity and the unknown. We as human beings, we love answers, and we thrive to have answers to things, but when we don't have those answers, that's when all the negative, feelings start to arise, and we don't know what to do. But being confronted something that is so foreign, so alien, so something that you're completely not used to, for something to be so unfamiliar, this movie really encapsulates those feelings, and those fears that we have as human beings, at least in my opinion. I think this movie's absolutely fantastic. If I had to rate it, I think I would honestly give it a 10 out of 10. As of June 2023, this is still my favorite film that I've seen this year. I think it's going to be really hard to beat it. Again, I'm excited to see where movies like this take us in the future. I think it really branches out to new and interesting ideas and concepts that I can't wait for, people to tackle. And it's going to be fun. And Skinamarink is fucking awesome. It's so cool. If this doesn't sound like your thing, I totally get it. It's very out there. It's very weird. It's very experimental, but holy shit, I absolutely love it. And if this sounds like something that is right up your alley, definitely give it a shot. It's great. It'll go down as one of my favorites of the year for sure, if not my favorite. And that's really all I have to say about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos coming soon in the very near future, and I will see you guys.